At BlenderCon this year, Ton Roosendaal asked for something he never has before.
And that is money, right?
So why now? Is Blender in financial trouble? Well, rest assured, Blender isn't going bankrupt, but it still needs our help. So what's going on? Well, Blender is run on donations, but less than 0.5% of its users donate, while other open source programs like Thunderbird get proportionally 5 times the support, which is why in 2023, only 10,200 people donated to the Blender Fund, even though it has over 2.5 million monthly users. So why are Blender's numbers so low? Well, Blender has been dealing with this problem since the very beginning. It was first released to the public in 1994, but that isn't the Blender we all know. In 1998, Ton Roosendaal, the creator of Blender, began to sell shares of Blender to be able to pay for its development. But this caused a huge problem, because in 2002, he decided to release Blender as open source, but he couldn't, because he only owned 10% of the company, and his investors didn't want to just give away the software for free. To solve this, he created the Blender Foundation, which aimed to raise $100,000 to be able to buy back Blender from the investors. Luckily, this goal was achieved, and Blender was released as the open source community-focused program we all know and love today. But after that initial buyout, Blender has never really asked for money. They obviously encourage donations, but it was at the bottom of their site and was really subtle. So why now? Why does Blender need more funds today than it did back then? One of the main reasons is industry integration. In his keynote address, Roosendaal talked about the main areas Blender is trying to develop. Things like Vulkan, Eevee Next, and Grease Pencil 3. Because today, Blender is not just trying to become better for hobbyists and freelancers, it's also trying to break into the industry, to compete with the likes of Maya, 3ds Max, and Houdini. But that takes money. In 2023, Blender earned a little over $3 million from donations, while Autodesk raked in $5 billion. But if Blender can achieve their goal of having 2% of users donate back to Blender, that would raise their budget from $3 to $18 million, assuming the same average donation. If we could do that, then Blender would have the funding to develop into an even better tool that could compete with the Big Four. That would in turn attract more users, which would mean more funding, and so on. That's why this is important. And Blender has taken huge strides toward this goal. How? Firstly, by just asking for donations. Just like how when YouTubers ask you to press the like button, you're more likely to do so, Blender asking for money works, even if it's not subtle. Secondly, they put it on their front page.
Because Blender's donation campaigns are very friendly and quiet, right? They're not really in the way. So a lot of people forget about it. But you should put it more in your face.
And finally, they made it more streamlined, easier to give, which has helped tremendously. So what can you do aside from donating? I mean, donating is the obvious solution, but not everyone is in a position where they can donate. Well, you've already helped in some small way just by watching this video. For every view, I'll be donating 1/10 of a cent to the Blender Fund. It doesn't sound like much, but if this becomes my most popular video, you'll have donated over $400. So selfishly, I'd love it if you hit the like button, commented, and subscribed to help boost this video. But realistically, you can do more than just 1/10 of a cent. The best thing you can do is to donate yourself. If you've ever made any money off of Blender, consider giving back a small percentage of that. But if you're not in a position where you can donate, leveraging your influence online and in person with other Blender users, encouraging them to donate as well is a huge help. But let's look toward the future. What is Blender working on right now that could possibly even break into the industry? And what would change if we could get 2% to donate? So first is Vulkan. Vulkan is essentially the industry standard API. APIs take the code for a program and turn it into a usable interface. Blender's been using the same API, OpenGL, for a long time, but it was developed in the 90s and can't take full advantage of today's hardware. So Blender is transitioning to Vulkan, which will lead to a much more performant and future-proof system. Vulkan has actually been implemented into Blender's experimental build since 4.0, but once it's stable and is released in the full version, that will be a huge leap forward. Second is Grease Pencil 3. This one's actually already released with Blender 4.3, and it can take advantage of geometry nodes and procedural editing, which is huge. And this is what Ton Roosendaal had to say about it.
I also would like to mention that Grease Pencil is one of the reasons why the film industry is really looking into Blender. because that's all the concept artists and the storyboarders, the story artists, they're all using it for developing film.
This is crazy. We've already seen Grease Pencil in multi-million-dollar productions like Into the Spider-Verse and Soul, but with Grease Pencil 3 implementing powerful procedural tools as well, Blender may be on track to become the industry standard for 2D animation in the next couple decades. Maybe that's a little bit optimistic, but Grease Pencil 3 is here now. It was released in 4.3. So if Blender is able to build tools that can compete with industry standard programs right now with their limited funding, imagine what they could do if 2% donated. You also have to remember that Grease Pencil 3 was not the only thing added in the Blender 4.3 update. They also, are you ready, made the bevel modifier more modular, made sculpting 8 times faster, improved workspace change efficiency, gave more control over UV stretching, added a new sculpting brush system, made geometry nodes more efficient, and added new geometry nodes. And this is just a sample of the highlights. So what projects is Blender waiting on more funding to greenlight? Well, firstly, AI. AI is an extremely powerful tool, but it's just that, a tool. Blender's plan isn't just to cram it in where it isn't needed, but rather to use it where it's best. For example, AI is better at denoising than traditional algorithms, which is why Blender's already been using it for denoising. Blender's also working on their own built-in AI that will allow users to code easily with Python. Blender is also working on story tools, which will help with storyboarding and previs. This could be a huge step forward in the planning process and could absolutely help Blender break into more large studios. Another awesome project is character animation tools. These will help solo artists replace entire teams of animators by implementing a more modular and reusable workflow, which will help bridge the gap between individual creators or small indie studios and huge multi-million-dollar corporations. But the next project, Blender Lab, will be a massive step in breaking into the industry. One of the main reasons large studios ignore Blender is because of support. Autodesk offers support for its users, which is something that many large studios feel like they can't give up. But with Blender Lab, studios will be equipped with a manual for how to fix issues themselves when things go wrong. They won't have to search the internet for every minute problem, which is a huge step in the right direction and could potentially help many more Blender users be hired on large-scale productions. Next, Blender is working on internet integration. They've said they don't want Blender to be entirely reliant on the internet, but with the extensions platform, they've started the process of integrating it into their system. The ultimate goal is to have collaborative projects where multiple artists from across the world can work on the same project file, and that could be a deciding factor for many studios choosing their program. Finally, the improvement I'm most excited about is an entirely new modeling system. Not that mesh modeling is going to be done away with, but Blender is also looking at implementing NURBS, SDF, and Gaussian splatting modeling systems. This is extremely exciting, so if you're interested in helping to support Blender, it's the top link in the description.